Hey everyone, this is Mark Ryan coming at you with another video. Just hit 1,000 subscribers, so thought we'd have a special guest. That's what the poll results were. Hey, have a special guest. So today we have AD Robles.
Hey, AD, do you promise to be nice and to obey the 11th commandment? You shall be nice. You shall not speak ill of others or whatever. You promise to do that going forward in 2022?
No, I do not promise to do that.
No. If we're talking about Ruslan, so you did 12 videos on Ruslan.
And
that's
who's counting though, right? Who's counting?
Who's counting? Well, you've done more since then. And Ruslan took exception to that. Pretty big exception.
Very strong umbrage.
Yeah, strong umbrage. Oh my goodness. That was pretty funny with what Adam Greenway.
Oh yeah, I just pulled up that letter again today, and I was just laughing a little bit through it. It's just a really funny letter.
Yeah. But I thought we talked about your conversation kind of with Ruslan, and you had that conversation months and months ago.
Yeah.
And I think Ruslan, he woke up and his woke liberal leftist friends were like, hey, we demand the blood sacrifice of a conservative. And so he came out for blood in that he really did. Any thoughts on that conversation just probably 2 months later?
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think I did a couple of videos afterwards with other people. I think I did one on my own channel about what I thought about that conversation. And it really hasn't changed much. I think that I was not prepared for just the sheer amount of talking that he could do. He just talks a lot. And
well, he throws out so much mud. And you can't deflect all the mud. He throws 1,000 punches or ties 100 knots, and it takes time to untangle a knot. But he doesn't actually want to hear that knot being untangled or anything. He just wants to throw as much mud as he can.
Yeah. So if I were ever to speak with him again, which I don't know that I would do it, but if I were to ever, if he had a good idea, I'm not going to talk about just about anything.
Oh,
but
if he had I want to see another video for sure. But yeah,
if he did though, I'm gonna have to just tell him, hey, you need to shut up. I was trying to shut him up in a way that was not, mean, because I'm actually not really that mean of a guy. And I just couldn't figure out how to do it. But if we ever were to talk again, it would just be full of, hey, Ruslan, shut up for a second so I can answer some of these questions. And that's how it would go down. So I wasn't prepared for the sheer amount that he could talk. But I do think that what I was hoping would happen did happen, that you would see a very stark contrast between the two of us. And Ruslan's constantly talking about things like tone and, believe in all things and stuff like that. And he's always talking about being a really nice guy. But he's actually not that. He's the opposite of that. And I think anyone watching that video, by comparison to Ruslan, I look like a teddy bear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the beginning of the video, you're talking about essentials, basically. Hey, you and I were both Christians. We believe on the essentials. Well, I don't think I would. Honestly, I don't think I'd even give Ruslan that, because there's some obvious disagreements on the sufficiency of scripture, as he's embracing components of critical race theory. And have Eric Mason on his channel saying, hey, we can use critical race theory to help interpret the Bible. Essentially, that's what they've been doing. That's what woke preacher clips is. They're using CRT to interpret, analyze the Bible. And so Ruslan doesn't believe in the sufficiency of scripture. That would be a big difference between us, I would think. But even more than that, and it's been about 9 months ago, he came out saying, hey, Marcus Rogers, he's a brother in Christ. And
the Trinity denier, right?
He denies the Trinity, but it's even more than that. It's even more disturbing that he says in order to be saved, you have to have faith and be baptized in water and speak in tongues. Well, that's 2 heresies. We're up to actually 3 heresies now.
Usually Trinity denying doesn't come alone.
Yeah, it bleeds into other areas of theology. And Ruslan saying, hey, this guy's a brother in Christ. And so essentially that creates, first off, if I went to church today and I said, Pastor, I don't think the Trinity's real, or I deny that, and say, hey, if anyone in this church is not baptized or speaks in tongues, they'll be damned to hell, which is
Sure.
what Marcus Rogers teaches. Well, I should be placed under church discipline. Or if I were to say we should embrace people that teach those things, I would argue
Sure.
and say, hey, I should be placed under church discipline for those things.
Sure.
And I think the same would be true for Ruslan, who's embracing false teachers into the church, wrapping his arms around him, calling him brother in Christ. Any thoughts on that? I mean, what I'm saying is I don't think we even agree on the essentials with Ruslan.
Right. So yeah, no, I totally understand your point. You know, to be perfectly honest with you, and I was criticized about this by a few guys. I don't really know a whole lot about Ruslan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He kept saying I did 12 videos. Yeah, but it was 12 videos like analyzing one speech, like one thing. You know what I mean? Like I don't spend time watching
Pittman, yeah.
Yeah. I don't spend time watching Ruslan. I think I watched a couple other videos, you know, I don't remember how many, but a handful. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I would say that there's some obviously some deeper problems there. You know what I mean? If I remember having a conversation with someone when we were first starting our church plant, and we were talking about, you know, who we would let in as a member, right? And my theology says, you know, the membership bar is pretty low, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is, you have faith in Jesus Christ, you know, you baptize in the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, you can be a member of the church, right? Those are very easy ways to be, you know, received as a member of the church. I'm not looking for someone, in order to join my church, to sign on the Westminster Confession of Faith, because that's a lot of stuff that you have to kind of bring someone along in, right? And this was like a community church. It wasn't a Presbyterian church. And so the conversation we were having was, okay, if we have someone who professes faith and is a practicing homosexual, obviously they can't be a member of the church, right? That's grounds for dismissal. Mm-hmm. But what if you have somebody, this is the question we were kicking around. What if you have someone who's not a practicing homosexual, but has been fooled by a lot of these squishy kind of evangelicals out there? They believe everything, but they wonder whether or not homosexuality is a sin. Is that grounds for immediate dismissal? And my opinion on that is probably not immediate dismissal, but this is something that's a discipleship issue. You need to start discipling these people. Now, the reality is that these days that was like 10 years ago or something. These days, like the lines have gotten so much clearer than they used to be. So it's almost like at this point, you have to be a little bit harsher than you had to be 10 years ago almost. So I don't know. I mean, I can definitely see your point. It would really just depend on the details. I think embracing a Trinitarian heretic, a Unitarian heretic who believes in, you know, works-based salvation, that's a huge red flag. So clearly there's something going on at the fundamental level that we're not on the same page about.
Oh yeah, it's for sure. I mean, because I'm the same way, that if someone believes in grace alone, faith alone, Christ alone, like in the real Christ, like the deity of Christ, the virgin birth, you know, those things. Yes, we embrace them as a Christian, and it's not, Ruslan kind of paints it as if, you know, you're not part of, what would you call it, their church or their tribe, unless you got to believe in 1,000 different things, those fundamentalist Christians, you know. Well, no.
That's such a caricature. Yeah,
it is a caricature.
It's basic stuff we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, did Ruslan, did they talk about the Trinity at the time and all that?
Well, he had a video with Alan Parr and the guy from What Do You Mean? I think his name's John, I think. Mm-hmm. And they talked about the Trinity and everything. But Ruslan,
so in this video, he's like, they talked about the Trinity and how he doesn't believe in the Trinity. And Ruslan's like, oh, you're still a brother.
When you talk to Sabellian and some Sabellian folks, or people that deny the Trinity, they can be really sly and really kind of slippery. You can't really tackle them down, you know, wishy-washy, or
kind of like Ruslan.
Yeah. Well, did you ever watch the Elephant in the Room conferences by chance from years and years ago? With Matt Chandler.
Oh, yeah. I did the Elephant Room, right? With Chandler and Driscoll and all those guys.
Yep. Yeah. They had the first one, and then they had the second one, and the second one was controversial because they invited TD Jakes.
Yeah.
You know, as kind of are you inviting him as a believer to talk about Christian things or what's going on? And so I think it was James McDonald that talked to him, and TD Jakes just kind of weaseled himself out of everything, because they're really good at doing that. The Trinity is a pretty, what's the word? Precise doctrine where, hey, God manifests himself in three ways. And it's hard to really pin someone down on something like that.
Yeah. Yep. So, okay, I see what you're saying. So this is kind of my point. So yeah, I agree. So if they were talking about the Trinity and Marcus Rogers is doing that thing where it's kind of very subversive and he's not really saying what he believes, kind of like how Ruslan tried to hide the fact that he believes women should preach to men. It took me a while to pin him down on that because I just was so shocked that he was lying to me. But anyway, if Marcus was doing that, like, I'm not going to necessarily, Ruslan's not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm not going to necessarily like fault Ruslan for not being able to pin him down on the Trinity. If he's like doing that weasel thing that they typically do. Because I agree with you. The Trinitarian heretics out there, they're super weaselly. Yeah.
Well, and so a while ago, I made a video on Ruslan and Leighton Flowers. Leighton Flowers is kind of like your stage cage Arminian, who wakes up every day, does your...
I know about Leighton.
Yep. Does your anti-James White video and, pray goes to bed, dreams about him and does it all over again. But I thought in that video, Ruslan's saying, hey, I used to be a Calvinist and I left Calvinism, and that he uses that as kind of an appeal to authority, saying, hey, I know
he knows what it's like. Yeah, he knows Calvinism, right?
Yep, exactly. How Leighton does it too. But in that video, he says, hey, I was never a 1,000-point Calvinist, and I never believed in total depravity, which is like, you were a Calvinist that didn't believe in total depravity?
That's just one of the 5. It's not 1,000-point Calvinism.
And then he goes on to say, hey, I didn't believe in limited atonement. Well, Calvinism's Trinitarian. God elects, the Son atones, and the Spirit regenerates. And to not believe in limited atonement, as Calvinists do, well, then you don't believe in the Trinitarian nature of how Calvinists believe in that. And so essentially, he didn't believe in those things either, with any consistency. He would have been like a schizophrenic, confused Calvinist, is what I would say.
He was a Calvinist because it was cool to be Calvinist, but he didn't actually know what Calvinism was.
That's exactly right.
You can't be a Calvinist and reject any of the points, much less 2 of them. I mean, normally they do the limited atonement and they try to do some weasel stuff in there, but to reject 2 of them, it makes no sense to reject one and not all of them. They all stand and fall together. But most of the time, the weasel stuff is with limited atonement. But to reject 2 of them, like, why would you even call yourself a Calvinist at that point?
Yeah, well, probably because again, it was cool during the.
It was cool for a little bit.
Yeah. Yep.
Not anymore.
But then
that's good. That's fine.
He left Calvinism. Why did he leave Calvinism? Well, he ended up taking Financial Peace University, and his Calvinist pastor friend, he wanted to just preach the gospel, focus on the gospel, and Ruslan wasn't happy with that, and so. He went on to take Financial Peace University, and he was digging into FPU, and he scratched his head. And I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit, but go watch his video on why he leaving Calvinism, which you can't leave Calvinism if you weren't a Calvinist. But he was digging into Financial Peace University. Hey, the 5 points of Calvinism, they're not in the 7 baby steps, are they? But his testimony why he left Calvinism, well, he took Financial Peace University, and his Calvinist friend, hey, he wanted to just preach the gospel. And the way he tells the story.
Wait.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, we're talking about the Dave Ramsey program, right? The Get Out of Debt program.
Yeah, Dave Ramsey, the 7 baby steps.
You must be making this up, Mark. Why are you lying to me?
I'm not lying to you, dude. But no, and Leighton Flowers, when he talks to Ruslan, he's saying, hey, we shouldn't leave Calvinism over, hey, Financial Peace University. It should be over, we were exegeting scripture. Dude,
and you got to give Leighton credit. He's probably like, what is this guy talking about? Because Leighton is not the most level-headed person when he's talking about Calvinism.
Yeah,
but even that was too crazy. That was a bridge too far for Leighton.
but to be fair to Ruslan, though, he's saying, hey, these Calvinists, they just want to focus on the gospel, and they don't want to focus on finances, and their finances are a mess because they hate, all they do is gospel stuff, or but I thought it's pretty funny because, hey, not again denied those things and left it over Financial Peace University. Well, Leighton Flowers ended up responding to my video. I was hoping Ruslan would respond. Well, Leighton Flowers responds instead to that whole video.
He's on our level, so that's why that's how he responds to us.
Yep.
So what did he say? Did he affirm that Calvinist finances are a mess and they don't care about finances?
Well, it's funny because there's parts in the video where he gently corrects Ruslan over stuff that he says, hey, there's probably some Arminians maybe somewhere that their finances are a mess, when you listen to Ruslan, he'll say, Calvinists, they like to elevate everything. You're hostile towards God. Everyone hates God. And I'm like, huh? What? Like, you don't believe that?
It's in the Bible, bro. Like,
have you read he said he's read the Bible like over 20 times or something.
This is so interesting because this actually plays into our conversation as well. Because if you remember in our conversation, and if you haven't watched it, and you're watching this show, I understand it was 3 hours long, which I was not expecting to be that long. But anyway, at one point, I think the point where I was at my best was when, he was obviously very offended for the things that I would say about him and the way I talk. And, he's like this dog, like that. He's very offended by that. And I wasn't apologizing for anything. But then I kind of made the point. And what's interesting is, though, Ruslan, that you're super offended by that, but you're not offended when people are lying about God. It's like, yeah, I am going to elevate that because you could say whatever you want to me, and I'm probably worse than you could say. I'm a sinner, man. Like I know my sin very intimately. So say whatever you want. I get it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But when you start lying about God and saying things about God that aren't true, that's when I get a little bit upset, especially when you're trying to position yourself as this like reasonable teacher, sit at my feet, dog, like that's upsetting. And so it's interesting that he's actually pointing to Calvinism as that's a big problem of Calvin. That's a big feature of Calvinism because it's making much more of God than you would make of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a video of Ruslan. He has Eric Mason on his channel, and he's saying, hey, Calvinists, is it just the Calvinists who are rejecting the woke movement, the CRT stuff? Is it just essentially, hey, is it just the Calvinists? They hate justice and they're against this stuff.
Man, they just love God too much that they don't like justice.
Yep. And Eric Mason, he actually makes a really good point in that, hey, it's actually kind of the fundamentalist strain is what Eric Mason says that is kind of has it's immune to the woke stuff. Sure. And so the more fundamentalist Calvinist, if you want to use that word, I don't really like that word. I would just say biblical ones. Hey, they haven't fallen to this stuff. But the same thing is true with the Pentecostal movement. Is what I want to point out. Woke preacher clips. Hey, they've got all those clips. There's Southern Baptist. There's Methodist. There's a lot of folks there. I haven't seen any that I can think of Pentecostals in woke preacher clips. Well, that's because Pentecostalism and fundamentalism, historically, they've went hand in hand together.
Well, I don't know a whole lot about the history of Pentecostalism. I do know about Pentecostalism just because my grandfather comes out of the Pentecostal movement. In fact, he's still sort of involved with some of those kinds of churches and stuff like that. And he's very anti-woke, very conservative in general. Loves the Lord, loves scripture, and listen, like, I know Ruslan likes to use fundamentalist as an insult. Mm-hmm. I don't identify as a fundamentalist. I would never sign, hey, I'm a fundamentalist on anything. But if you want to call me one, I don't take it as an insult because, sure. Yeah. I believe that there are things in the Bible that we need to do. And that's just that. And I'm not going to debate you on it. I'm not going to argue with you about it. I'm not going to decide whether or not God was right. He was right. And if you want to call that fundamentalism, what I want to call it is just being a believer. Mm-hmm. It's just belief. That's faith.
Well, I know a little bit about it because, hey, I grew up in the Assemblies of God church. I still go to an Assemblies of God church. I went to the same church now for about 26, 27 years, something like that.
Good for you, man.
And went to a Bible college in North Dakota. And right. I went right as the fundamentalist kind of strain was dying out of the Assemblies of God. Like it's pretty well dead out of the Assemblies of God, in that, hey, fundamentalism would teach, hey, you can't dance. Eventually become, hey, you can dance. Don't shake your hips though. Stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
Hey, you can't go to the movies.
Sure.
Sporting events where alcohol is served, can't do that kind of stuff. Actually, at our Bible college, years and years before I went, you could not date unless you went before the dean of the college and got permission to date. And if you did date, don't you dare hold hands. No premarital hand holding whatsoever. You hold
That's
two
really
ends
rough,
of a
man.
stick.
That's very salacious. Premarital hand holding.
I know. Yep. Oh man. But that's kind of the roots of the Assembly of God. The roots of the Pentecostal movement would be with that and fundamentalism. Well, that fundamentalist strain has pretty much died out of Pentecostalism.
Yeah. And I don't think that's what Ruslan and Eric Mason are talking about. That's not the kind of fundamentalist they mean, I don't think. Or is it?
I just the fundamental, I guess what they would label the fundamentalist Christians. So like John MacArthur would be in that.
Sure.
You and I would be in that. They would label us in that for sure.
Yeah, because what I agree with you. When I think fundamentalism, the reason why I wouldn't sign my name as a fundamentalist is because I think of what you're thinking. Can't dance, can't wear jeans if you're a girl, stuff like that. Like that's kind of what I would think. But I know what they mean when they say it, so that's why I don't spurn the title. Like if somebody calls me a fundamentalist, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah. Because they'll kind of just twist words. That's what postmoderns do.
Is what they do. Yeah.
And the CRT folks, they twist words to mean what they want them to mean and everything.
Sure.
Yep. But yeah, when I went to Bible college, hey, you watch a rated R movie, $50 fine. You cuss, they would fine you for cussing, stuff like that. But beyond that too, with Pentecostals, they're pretty like pre-mill. They have a pessimistic eschatology.
Sure.
And so I think they see a new ideology like critical race theory, and your older Pentecostals would anathematize that like in a heartbeat, especially with the more pessimistic stuff and all that. And younger Pentecostals, I think, would be more open to embracing some of the woke stuff. But not your older ones for sure. Yeah.
And I wonder, if the woke preacher clips, he does post sometimes pastors that I've never heard of, but I think he focuses on, so then what I mean is like, maybe they're maybe Pentecostal-ish. I don't know. But what I think he probably could, if he tried, I bet you he could find some Pentecostal, woke stuff. I think he tries to focus on these sort of evangelical conference circuit, kind of people, Big Eva, like I call him. I think he tries to focus on that as much as he can.
On that, yeah. Well, yeah, because you kind of find your folks that are like, and then you can go to them over and over again.
Yeah,
Phil Vischer or whoever. Phil Vischer, did he go to an Assembly of God school? I don't know.
I think the other thing too is that a lot of people don't even consider Pentecostals like part of evangelicalism or part of Christianity. Some people don't even consider that. So they're like, oh yeah, whatever. They're crazy. Of course they're going to believe crazy things. Like, so I think maybe that's why you don't hear about it so much. I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
Well, a lot of folks they think Pentecostalism, they think prosperity gospel.
Right.
I think those things are like hand in hand.
Sure.
Whereas I'd be one of those folks saying, hey, no, you got to denounce that. You have to separate yourself from especially egregious ideologies and things like that for sure.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Like, I don't think woke preacher clips is target. Like, if he heard, what's his face, the white guy with the creepy smile, prosperity guy, whatever his name is, the main dude, the one who's, oh, man, what is his name? Osteen.
Okay, yeah.
Like, if he heard Osteen saying something woke, it's not really that big a deal because Osteen has 100 other problems. Like, who cares, right?
Like, Doctrinal Watchdog would be on that one instead, right?
There you go.
He is, because Joel Osteen's son, Jonathan, he's like a younger, better looking Joel Osteen. He's out preaching now, I guess.
Is that right? Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Same creepy smile.
Oh yeah. Oh, but younger. Yep.
But younger, so it's even more creepy.
Younger, more hip.
So yeah, I wonder if I spent time looking, if I could find some Pentecostal examples. I bet you I could, but I don't know. I mean, it's not my area, so I don't feel responsible to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I mean, like the woke movement, it's infected every denomination on
Sure, it'd
some
be
level.
impossible
And
not to find it somewhere. Yeah. But I think I see your point. It's like, this does tend to, it does seem, at least to me, that there's a ton of Calvinists, like those kind of like modern Calvinists that are, part of that what they call it, new Calvinism. There's a lot of those people that are woke. It does seem to me to be like a disproportionate amount of new Calvinists, guys.
And even the if you want to say charismatic Calvinists, or the ones who are continuationists,
sure,
well, which would be Matt Chandler, David Platt, I think David Platt,
and I think so.
Even John Piper. Well, they're the ones going woke, and so there could be a good counter, perspective there for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but that's an interesting thing to think about, though.
John Harris, he's thrown it out there like once or twice where he's thought about covering the Assemblies of God, because at some level, it is affecting the Assemblies of God. I could see it for sure. With the younger, especially with the younger crowd, and some of the historical things in the Assemblies of God. But maybe with that, we'll switch to kind of your book. So I've got your book too, Social Justice Pharisees. Read it, liked it a lot. And these are really, if you're going to get into social justice movement, I think you have to read 3 books: Fault Lines by Vodi Balcom, Social Justice and Christianity, Religions in Conflict by John Harris, and then like this book here, Social Justice Pharisees.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. The one chapter that fascinated me, grabbed my attention, and it's not a ton about critical race theory, but it's about partiality. It's chapter 6, and you talk about partiality and scholarships, basically. And the SBC is having this Kingdom Diversity Project, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was the Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in particular, but pretty much every SBC entity is doing it.
Mm-hmm. And they're giving out scholarships to minorities and women. And in the book, you point out, hey, like that's partiality. You cannot do that.
Sure.
And so that's pretty fair to say. And hey, I wholeheartedly agree with that. That is partiality. You cannot do something like that. And yet that got my mind going at like 1,000 miles per hour. Well, how would we apply this to other different areas? So
sure.
Say I woke up tomorrow and said, hey, I'm a millionaire. I have a heart for pastors. And hey, a pastor goes to Bible college, they graduate, they have $50,000 of student loan debt. If I were to go out and say, hey, I want to pay for this pastor's student loan debt, hey, go to a Bible college, get trained in the ministry, graduate, no debt. Well, that would exclude women from
right,
receiving that scholarship. Something like that. Would that be partiality, do you think?
Right. So we make this. So this is the thing about this. So we make distinctions in our life all the time, right? I remember somebody when I think I did a video about this, the same verse that I covered in the book, and they asked me about like, okay, so like, what about your own family, right? Because I treat my family differently than I treat anybody else. I provide for my family, which excludes everybody else. I provide a shelter, I provide food, that excludes everybody else. I'm partial to my wife in a certain way. I obviously I want to love all women, but I love my wife in a different way than I love all other women, right? And so we're making exclusions, and we're deciding between one or the other in a million different ways, right? What I'm concerned with in the book is an institutional rule as a Christian institution. I'm not really concerned with what individuals are doing with their money. If I want to give my money to, Vietnamese, paraplegics that, have a name that starts with C, it's my money. I mean, I can do whatever I want. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's not about that. What I'm concerned with is institutional and really judging wrongly between parties. So a scholarship for pastors, for example, because a seminary, you would think it would exist to train pastors. So if you're going to provide a scholarship to pastors and it goes to only men because only men are at the seminary, which is pretty much what I think should be. Yeah. But anyway, side issue. I guess maybe I am controversial. That's not judging unfairly. That's not judging unfairly in a way that's taking something into account that you shouldn't be taking into account. That's judging fairly. I mean, men are going to be pastors. You have a heart for pastors. Your money's going to men. I mean, it's just that simple. So if you were in a context of like a church, or you're a judge, you're judging a case or something like that, and you're taking into account things other than what God has commanded you to do, that's the kind of partiality that I'm interested in. So skin color in providing financial assistance, see, that's a charity. That's a function of the church that, honestly, so this is a whole other can of worms. Should a seminary even exist? But the seminary is operating essentially under the church, right? At least in the SBC, it would be. Mm-hmm. So that would be giving charity based on sex or skin color. That's not allowed. I mean, that's the specific examples we have in the scripture. So it's like, I see what you're saying, but I'm not really concerned with private giving and things like that.
Well, and because there's one sentence in the book, it says a Christian is not allowed to show partiality in the charity they provide. And so that goes beyond the institution, per se, and I get it. And well, especially under Marxism, under what we see today,
sure.
Marxism takes the oppressed groups and provides partiality towards them.
Sure.
And so they like to flip justice on its head and be unjust and all that.
Sure.
And as Christians, we can't do that. And yet, since you use the word partiality there, I mean, the Bible defines what partiality is. And so I guess at the end of the day, I agree with that. And yet at the same sense, we do in a sense, if my neighbor, right next door needs help, I should probably help that neighbor as opposed to 150 doors down or 100 doors down too.
Sure.
And that someone can say,
point.
Hey, that's partiality. Well, that's my closest neighbor. And
sure.
Yeah,
no, I see your point. And maybe, so there's a couple areas in the book, and I think maybe you found a new one where someone has come to me and said, hey, this probably could have used like another paragraph or two. And maybe that's the case here, because that sentence in isolation, you kind of have to agree with it because I used a biblical word, but it does kind of need a little bit of explanation, I think.
Chapter 6, I thought you could write a whole a mini book or something on that. Because, you go to places. Have you ever been to Montana before?
I've never been. No,
you should come out sometime. But you go to places, Montana, we'll have signs. Hey, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone for any reason. I mean, we're one of those states. We're just, hey, get away and let people do what they want, which, hey, I love.
That's how it should be. Yeah. At least legally.
Yep. And yet, at the same time, hey, there's been laws in the past where there has been partiality, and how do we deal with people saying, hey, you have a certain skin color, we're not going to provide any services to you. Something like that.
Yeah. It's a really good point. And it's funny that you say that you could write a whole book on chapter 6. My original idea for the book was to be a book all about partiality. Just that's the only topic of the book. And to go through just kind of like, I was trying to, there's a book by Ron Paul where he talks about, I think it's called Liberty Defined, and he goes through the alphabet A through Z of different ways that, like A is for abortion. He talks about liberty and abortion, and why abortion is not, libertarian ideal, stuff like that. Anyway, I was thinking about doing something similar with partiality, A through Z, and just go through different things that are partiality that we don't consider partiality. So it's funny because that's right. You could write a whole book just on that topic.
So are you writing a second book then, or any plans?
I have an idea for a second book. I have two ideas, but the book writing process was way harder than I thought it would be. So I'm still taking a break.
Well, how long did it take you to write Social Justice Pharisees? Which I steal that phrase all the time now. You talk to someone who's unbiblical, Social Justice Pharisee, but
good. Yeah. Well, I even got a little bit of kudos from Jonathan Lehman, because he said that critical race theory is the premier Phariseeism of our day. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he was referencing my book, probably not, but he agrees with me. This is Phariseeism.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
Well,
weirdly, he agrees with me.
What with the book title, I always think of Matt Chandler, MLK 50, right? Was it there where he's talking about, hey,
Yep.
you guys are just like the Pharisees?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, they brag. We would have never
Yep.
persecuted the prophets. We never would have persecuted people that went before us. Which, hey, they're talking about true prophets there. And then Matt Chandler is talking about a false teacher and mixing categories like egregiously, I think.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. No, I hear you. That was a pretty ridiculous speech.
mhm.
But to answer your question, it took me probably, let's see, it probably took me about 4 months to write it. And most of that time is like whittling it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Mhm. Oh, let's see. And so the last thing to talk about, I guess, or two things would be what conspiracy theories. So every once in a while, you have a good conspiracy theory segment on your channel. You haven't done one in a while,
I know I haven't. I've got there's just so many to choose from. It's hard to choose.
which you kind of alluded to a good one yesterday, though, or what could become one with the soldier robot things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my brother we were talking about the metaverse.
Mhm.
And for those of you who don't know, the metaverse is like this weird virtual reality thing where, you wear these goggles and you can see, augmented reality over real reality. And a lot of people think that the play is they want you to be so invested in this digital world that you forget what's going on in the real world and that they can kind of take over everything. Right. And, virtual reality is kind of cool, but the more time that passes and the more things I see from the powers that be and from big tech, the less interested I am in, in that kind of thing. So anyway,
Yeah.
we were talking about virtual reality, and then we were talking about the robots that exist now. And so like Boston Dynamics has these videos of these robots and they're very lifelike motions. These two robots are doing parkour and it's just so creepy because they're like balance themselves like a human would and they correct themselves like a human would, but there are these robots. And so I was thinking, what if like the end game goal is like to incorporate virtual reality and these robot suits, and so you're like sitting in your house with the stupid goggles controlling this robot that's actually doing the things. And maybe there's going to be a robot takeover. They've kind of been grooming us for that, Terminator movies and stuff like that. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, because well, and we watch the movies. We all know this is a bad idea. It doesn't end well with,
But they're going for it.
And this is new, like a new generation of AI. Because with phones, they've improved so much. We're on a 5G now, and later there'll be 6G and stuff. Well, we're on to a entirely new generation of artificial intelligence. And hey, maybe I was thinking maybe they'll equip these robots with like lie detectors and they'll go around.
Oh yeah.
Have you been vaccinated? And well, then they'll know whether you're lying or not. And they'll
there's some creepy stuff too. Like I'm a recruiter by trade, and there's a lot of technologies currently being developed where you record, like you get interviewed not by a person but by a machine, and it records your answers to a question like, hey, why'd you leave your last job, or whatever, you know what I mean? And based on how you answer, the word choice, the intonation of your voice, it can tell this exact kind of stuff if you're making something up, or if you're being truthful, and if you're this kind of a personality type. And they're trying to automate all this stuff. I think some of this is a total pipe dream, but they're trying their darndest. You know what I mean?
That's crazy. I mean,
yeah,
the way that the super artificial intelligence is going out, though, they're making this stuff a lot more intelligent as time goes by. Just it doubles and triples and stuff. I saw an article from Not the Bee, right? And they were saying, hey, there's these, I should quote it accurately, created things that can now reproduce.
Oh yeah, I saw that. The robots that can reproduce themselves. Yeah,
robots that can read. Yeah, that's crazy.
Not a good idea.
Yeah,
not a good idea.
That can end well. Yeah.
But and then there's a whole bunch of other kind of weird stuff. Have you ever heard of transhumanism and all that kind of thing?
A little bit. I've never dived really into it, but yeah.
It's all about like how machines can augment people's. That's how it started. How machines can augment humans, right, and make them better or stronger, or smarter, or whatever it is. But then there's also this strain to it where people are trying to figure out how to live forever. In other words, Elon Musk uploads his brain to one of these weird robots. And he's like, okay, so now I'm going to live forever because it's me and the robots has my brain waves or whatever it is. And people are working on this, like companies like Meta and stuff like that. They're working on this kind of stuff. This is how they're thinking. Now, obviously, you and I know as Christians, that's obviously not going to work in the way they think it's going to work, but they believe it and they're going for it, man. Who knows what they're going to do? It's just this weird stuff going on.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then
I remember the first time I heard about that, I thought that the person that told me, I thought it was going nuts. But then I looked into it and it's legitimate. They're trying to do it.
The latest thing I've heard about, and it's been out there for months, I think 5 or more months, from the World Economic Forum. They won't even hide the stuff. They just put it out in the open, but they're talking about a cyber pandemic. Hey, what if there's a cyber pandemic?
Yeah.
We can't, there's other viruses that have went around into the internet and stuff. They reproduce. There's been bad things to come out of it, but they're saying, hey, it's only a matter of time until there is a cyber pandemic that is much worse. Everything else pales in comparison, basically. But hey, you wake up one day and it's kind of like COVID-19, where this virus starts spreading through devices connected to the internet. And it's more contagious, if you want to use that word, than COVID-19. And so if I understand it correctly, hey, we'll wake up one of these days and there'll be millions of devices that are infected by this new virus. And I don't know if it'd be like a ransomware virus or what the virus would be exactly, but it something like that to me sounds super believable, you know, and that would destroy kind of our internet kind of infrastructure.
Well, so not only does it sound believable, but it, you know, you asked me about this before we started recording, and I've never heard of this, but not only does it sound super believable, it also sounds very convenient considering, you know, the financial situation that the United States finds itself in, other countries, other Western countries find themselves in. I mean, there's no way that these countries, including ours, can ever pay back its debts. We're already insolvent. You know, and they admit this in a roundabout way. You know, you hear Janet Yellen get up and she goes, well, if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we're not going to be able to pay our liabilities. And, you know, the United States always pays its debts. Well, that would be like calling up your credit card company and saying, look, if you don't raise my limit, I won't be able to pay my bill. They'd laugh at you. They'd be like, are you insane? But that means you're insolvent, by the way. If you can't pay your bills unless you get more loans, you're insolvent. So the United States is insolvent. So eventually everyone's going to catch on this. And so what's the way that you can kind of get out of this, right? Either war or somehow reset everything. How do you reset everything?
That's the great reset is, hey, nations have so much debt. Everything needs to be kind of reset. This would be one way to do it. I mean, if the internet is down, because they'll basically said, according to this theory, hey, your devices, the internet needs to basically come down. There needs to be kind of a like vaccine, if you want to use that word, or antivirus patch or whatever to fix this. But hey, I rarely carry cash with me. I pay with debit card, I pay with credit card, and you would have economies just come to a grinding halt.
Yeah, absolutely.
If something like that
it's absolutely, it would be an impossible situation for many people. I actually recommend, I've done this on my channel a few times, that people keep a small amount of physical cash on them in their house at all times. Like, I'm not talking like, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I'm saying like enough to like, if the grid went down for a weekend or a week or something like that, you could still transact some kind of business. You know what I mean? You know, it's if we didn't have the internet, like for a couple hours, I think people would panic. It would be panic mode. For just like if it was down for a couple hours,
and then we'd be back in the Stone Age too, not
immediately.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What you got
to do then, you're in Montana, you got to get a off-grid homestead with a fallout shelter and
a bunch of chickens
burning
and stuff.
stove. Yeah, get some chickens.
How are your chickens doing?
They're doing great. I got one. So I still have all 10 of them. Didn't lose any of them. And one of them decided to start molting like yesterday, and it gets into the teens at night. So this thing is in the coop, just like freezing, and it has like hardly any feathers. And it's like, why'd you choose now to molt? This is like the dumbest idea ever.
But
they're fine.
Yeah. Good. Uh, In my hometown, we can't have chickens. They're banned from city limits. Small town,
Wow.
6,000 people, but
That is so lame.
yeah, and there's a fight. It seems like there's a fight every year on whether we can have chickens or not in city limits. So,
Do some people just do it anyway?
uh, I think so. I mean, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's another
But,
option. But yeah, I get it, man. That sucks.
mhm. But I mean, most Montana's out of city limits and rural and all that.
Yeah.
And plenty of, you know, it's
Yeah.
it'd be the perfect place to be during a cyber attack or whatever. Just even nowadays, Montanans are so sheltered from all the woke stuff.
Yeah.
And the only way that we really come across is our colleges and universities, and then just social media.
Yeah.
Other than that,
Yeah. No, it's everywhere. If you're in a place where it's not reaching quite as much, consider yourself lucky, man, and stay on guard, because the evangelists of the woke church, they can't leave anything alone. They need it all. They're totally post millennial about their nonsense. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And well, the last thing I thought we would talk about kind of is like Christian nationalism. And I think eventually we woke up one day and hey, the George Floyd riots and protest, came out of nowhere. That whole thing happened. And then America kind of just changes. Everything's about racism, kind of overnight almost. And then from there, a lot of people probably came across your channel as we're seeing just everything happen.
Yeah.
That's where I came across your channels after
A lot of people right around that time.
Yep, which makes sense. And then there's folks like you who were talking about critical race theory before that even happened. Well, I think the same thing will happen with Christian nationalism, where we saw a small part of it on January 6th, right? Hey, all those guys, they're Christian nationalists and whatever. But I think it'll happen to an even more intense level in the future, where we wake up, something happens. Oh, those guys, they're Christian nationalists. And when I hear a little bit about it, it's a lot of your woke folks that are talking about it. And it intersects with racism.
That's right.
Because they want to protect their privilege. They hate immigrants, things like that. And so I almost wish there'd be more of a response, or more looking into Christian nationalism, or kind of shining light on the Big Eva and folks who are kind of going at it, if that makes sense.
It's amazing to me that so many people that I assume are actually believers, because I still think that many of these people that talk about this stuff, they're just on the bandwagon, right? They're like Ruslan being a Calvinist. It's cool to talk about Christian nationalism, so I'm going to talk about it too. But what I find amazing is they can't see the play that's been run here, because what it started off was whiteness and white supremacy and stuff like that. And it didn't take too much effort to realize, oh, they're just actually against Americans, like the way it used to be, that like church on every corner. They're against that, and they just wish that there was less churches than there even are right now, kind of thing. Not to say that our past was perfect, but it was more Christian before. They hate that. They hate Christianity, is because what is whiteness? You look at like these charts of what whiteness is and white supremacy. It's like objective truth. It's like, things like that. Like they're just like basic foundations of a Christian worldview.
Yeah.
Man's leading the household. So like they actually just hate Paul. You know what I mean? Like they just hate Paul is what whiteness is. So we kind of saw that coming. Now they've kind of showed their hand, because they've seamlessly moved from white supremacy to Christian nationalism. And I think you're right. I think they like that play very much. And nobody caught it. It's like, dude, you realize you just switched from talking about white supremacists to Christians now. They put nationalists on the end. It sounds scary, but you're talking about Christians now. It's like that's an obvious play.
The dangerous thing is that if it's the same as like critical race theory, well, Christian nationalism has you ask 100 different people, it has 100 different definitions. There's no tangible definition. It's postmodern. And basically, hey, you're this Christian that we don't like over here. Well, you're a Christian nationalist.
You're a Christian nationalist, right?
And there's such a danger between letting, hey, CNN define what that is, and MSNBC, the Young Turks, because you and I, like, no doubt would be labeled by them as Christian nationalists. Hey, you believe Bernie Sanders was grilling a guy, I think he was going to a political office or a judge or something. But he had said that, hey, Muslims, they don't believe in the Jesus Christ of the Bible. They won't go to heaven. They won't inherit eternal life. Well, Bernie Sanders was grilling him saying, hey, you're not fit to be a politician. You are basically, you're a Christian nationalist, basically. This was years and years ago, but
right. Because of basic Christian doctrine, right?
You believe Jesus is the only way. Well, you're a bigot. You can't lead a country full of, all these different religions and stuff. Yeah. Right. Yep.
Insane stuff, man.
Yeah. Well, beyond that, I hear Jamar Tisby, and he's talking about Christian nationalism, and he starts talking about, what was the state, Missouri or Mississippi, that they got rid of the Confederate flag off their flag.
Yeah. Yep.
And they replaced it with "In God We Trust" on the flag. And so, well, Jamar Tisby's arguing, hey, that's Christian nationalism, something like that. And even more than that, he starts talking about churches that had the American flag on one side of the stage, then the Christian flag on the other side. And hey, there's churches that'll pledge allegiance to the Bible. Well, I grew up with that as a kid.
Sure.
We would do both at kids' church. And well, hey, you're a Christian nationalist for doing something like that. That's kind of the new thing that's going around.
Right. And what I find amazing is that, like, okay, Bernie Sanders, he's going to do what he wants to do. Jamar Tisby, he's a pretty obvious wolf, in my opinion. But what I find amazing is that the people that I would consider probably believers that are just going right along with it. Oh yeah, Christian nationalism is one of our biggest problems. Christian nationalism is a big issue. And it's like, and they don't really seek to make any distinctions. You would think that they'd want to make distinctions that Jamar wouldn't make, because Jamar is just trying to tear it all down, but they're not. They're just going with it. And it's like, dude, this play is being run against you. You're who they're coming for, unless you go all the way with them. You know what I mean? And I think some of them will go all the way with them and others won't, but it's just amazing to me that this is such an obvious telegraphed pass that people don't see it,
Yeah. We'll just give it some time, and we'll see. Hey, especially with the missionary movement. Hey, you want to take missionaries to other nations, preach the gospel, and convert them to your white colonial Christianity. Well, that's Christian supremacy or Christian nationalism.
Yep.
And so folks that embrace that, I don't think that they'll have any good, solid missionary movements either.
Yeah. And, and the wolves don't care, because that's their goal anyway. And I think that, at that point, hopefully the wheat will actually show itself as wheat. You know what I mean? I think everything's coming to a head at some point, and there's going to be something that happens that people are going to have to make a decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Kind of, well, like the next big thing. I mean, 2020, two big things really, between COVID and the George Floyd stuff. Who knows what the next thing will be? I mean, obviously the Equality Act, it's around the corner somewhere. Sure. Who knows how many years that'll be down the road. It's nice seeing that it seems like we have some time, but who knows how much time.
God bless, man. This is really fun. I appreciate it.
Well,
congrats on 1,000 subscribers. That's no small feat, man.
How long did it take you to reach 1,000 subscribers?
A while. It took me a while. I'll look back, because I'm sure I did a video about it, but I remember I was celebrating 100 subscribers, because that's, it's not easy. It's not easy. So congrats on that, man.
When you first start and you first get going, that first 1,000's like the hardest work.
Yeah,
even
man.
The first 100. The first 100 is hard work, and then after that, it kind of snowballs. And
let me see if I can find it real quick.
Yeah, it's taken me about a year.
Okay, so this is okay. So I did it on September 20th, 2018, and let me see if I can find my first video. You know what I can put? You know what I could do? I can find is the white church really this bad? So I started. It took me about a year, because I started in the fall of 2017, and then September 20th, 2018 is when I got 1,000. So a little less than a year, but just about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff, man. Congrats.
Yeah, it grew pretty quickly, especially after the George Floyd stuff. And I look up to folks who've been talking about critical race theory before it was popular. It's one thing to be caught off on, catch up on it after it takes the world by storm and you're caught off
Yeah.
guard and everything. But you're talking
Yeah.
about years before. So
Yeah, I might do a video about your question regarding partiality, because I think that's actually an important thing, because I actually don't think it's necessarily wrong. And people are going to think I'm a white supremacist when I say this, but I'm just going to say it. I don't think it's necessarily wrong to have affections for people of your ethnicity, because think about what an ethnicity is, right? Like, it's like an extended family, you know what I mean? And so I have affections for people in my family, and even those in my family who are unbelievers. Like, I have certain affections towards them, and I'll, if they needed money, I'd help them out, you know what I mean? Like, if they needed, if somebody in my family, asked for a loan, I'd probably just give them the money, as long as I had it, kind of thing. And it's like, so I have, and I think that your ethnicity is sort of like an extended family. I don't think there's anything wrong with having affections there, but what I want to push back against is an institutional, as a rule. If someone from another ethnicity comes to me, like, let's say I want to give charity to Puerto Ricans, right? And I'm going to do that. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with, though, is if you said a black guy comes, a white guy comes to me and says, "Hey, I need some food." Well, Jesus said, share food with people who don't have it. And so if you said, "Sorry, I only give money to Puerto Ricans," that would be a big problem.
yeah. Well, and so, like, we agree in that part of it's the attitude of the heart. God looks at the heart. We can't know people's hearts and everything.
Sure.
The social justice warriors, they know everyone's heart for sure.
Oh, of course they do.
Just know everything's racist, but biblically, we don't know people's hearts. Maybe sometimes it kind of spills out and you can see it more, but like, there's a love I have for my family that I just don't have for other families. I treat my family a different way. I'm called to treat them a different way than other families. And so even when at Bible college, I'm going, well, there's a scholarship. You have to be from Montana, North Dakota, or South Dakota, something like that, to get the scholarship, because it's a utility that provides services in those states. Well, that excludes 40 plus other states. Well, would something like that be partiality too? I don't think that would be partiality. I could see how that would be something to wrestle through too, though.
Yeah, I don't think so. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth it. Like I said, someone else had pointed out something else in my book that, they understand what I mean, but they could understand why someone who doesn't know me would be like, "Oh, that's not really quite right." It really does need a few extra paragraphs, I think. So that's a good point. And maybe I'll do a video on it.
Well, and like, take the classic thing, a Christian baker, and a gay person comes in, "Hey, bake me a cake." Well, I can't do that. That violates my conscience. Well, people could level the charge. Well, you're being partial there. You're not, you're saying, "Hey, everyone else will do cakes for whatever services for, but not someone who's gay." Well, that's an obvious where you're a Christian.
It's an obvious one. Yeah.
It's an obvious one. But say you own a grocery store. "Hey, we're not going to sell groceries to LGBTQ folks." Well, would that be partiality? Something like that. Of course, no Christian's doing that anywhere on earth.
Right. These are all hypotheticals, and Christians don't typically do that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, it's definitely worth exploring. I think it's definitely got me thinking. So I appreciate that, man.
Because you could go into a lot of just ethic things there, a lot of scenarios, I guess. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thanks a lot for inviting me on.
Yeah, it was a good chat. Thanks for coming on. And hey, go check out AD's channel sometime and watch him just, hack to shreds the social justice movement and kind of bring it to light. Hey, it has a false gospel and no forgiveness in that movement whatsoever. But hey, you take care, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
God bless.